So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 6 of the TSL Partner Power Summit on protecting biodiversity. And welcome now to the session, which is a panel discussion on next steps. What's next for young people and biodiversity? And this follows on from incredible discussions this week and debates with students and teachers and experts from all around the world. So the panel discussion is going to be moderated by Fumiko Kasuga, who is the Global Hub Director of Future Earth. And Future Earth is an amazing, amazing organization. It's a global network of scientists, researchers, and innovators focusing on how we can create a more sustainable future. So I know we're going to be in great hands with Fumiko. And without further ado, over to you. Thank you, Fumiko.
Thank you, Carl. And hello, everyone. As introduced, Future Earth is a global network of researchers and innovators for global sustainability. As Future Earth covers various disciplines in sustainability sciences, including biodiversity, and also that Future Earth encourages and promotes the integrative activities across the disciplines, and also together with the stakeholders in the society. I'm very excited to serve as the moderator today with the 4 distinguished panelists from various sectors in the society. Well, today, the entire population on the Earth is faced to both climate and health crises. We need to understand that the climate change and biodiversity loss have caused various interlinking events in the environment and in the society. And those are, and probably will, be the background causes of the current and future pandemics. Those changes in the environment and the society are very rapid and complex. Therefore, it is rather difficult to accurately estimate the resultant connective risk. However, those changes will worsen the inequality and poverty and threaten peace. The population who will be suffered most are the future generations, those in the developing countries and on small islands, while the current adults in the developed countries have most responsibility to this situation. We really need to work together with those vulnerable people urgently. I believe that the panelists today will provide unique visions based on their own expertise and experiences, hopefully with related topics to what's next for young people and biodiversity. Participants, you're welcome to write your questions to the panelists at Zoom Q&A corner. With this, I'm happy to introduce the first panelist, Mr. Christian Schwarzer. He's a steering committee member representing Europe and Global North Focal Point Global Youth Biodiversity Network. GYBN was involved in organizing the Youth Climate Summit earlier this year. Mr. Schwarzer, could you give us your statement?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this lovely introduction, Fumiko. And also thank you to everybody at TSL for giving me this opportunity to speak in this event. I'm really, really happy that you're organizing it because it's one of the few events that I'm aware of that is focusing on school students. And you guys are in a really, really important position in your life now because you can still make all the choices. You can now decide what course your life is going to take. Many of you are probably just sitting in school. You're probably very tired of just always staring on a screen, not being able to see your friends and others. And it's not an easy time. It's probably not the kind of time that anybody of us wanted to go through when we were in high school or in middle school. And I don't know what to say to you, but I just wish you a lot of energy to push through this difficult time. We will definitely get better times too. But nonetheless, many of you are probably now thinking, what is going to be next? What are you going to do after school? A lot of you are probably hearing the news at the moment. And as I speak, we just had a huge heat wave on the west coast of the US and Canada with temperatures up to 50 degrees. Here in Germany, we had flooding events. In New York, I'm hearing that the subway was flooded. So environmental issues are things that are happening all the time, and we're basically hearing from one disaster to another. And I don't know how you guys feel like, but sometimes I feel scared. Sometimes I wonder what is going to happen. How is the world going to look like in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years? What is going to happen to me? What can I do about this? And when I was in high school, I felt super powerless because, I was just busy studying for the next exam, trying to pass it. And I was really wondering, what is this all going to be about? The truth is, climate change is happening. We cannot stop this anymore. Biodiversity loss is rapidly progressing. And as much as I would like to tell you the opposite, we will not be able to stop this neither. But what we can decide and what the next 10 years are crucial for is how bad this is all going to be. We can still change the impact of climate change. We can still have an impact on how bad all these things are going to be. We still have a chance to change the course, and we still have a very realistic chance to make sure that the worst impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss not going to happen in that form. So we need to use this. And this is the choices that you can make. Sometimes when we're talking about biodiversity loss and climate change, we're feeling these are the huge problems that only heads of states, our leaders can solve, but all of us can be part of the solution. And it can be very simple. The next thing that you could do when you're sitting in front of your school, in front of your screen, you can ask your teacher, let's talk about biodiversity loss. Let's talk about climate change. Let's learn about this together. Let's understand the fundamentals. Let's focus on what each of us can do. When the pandemic is over, you can do projects in your school. You can start with very simple things like a school garden. You can learn about the species in your local area. And you will be surprised how many different species are always around us and how important all these species are. You can start by talking to your parents. What I'm always doing when I see my parents, when I come home, I tell them, please, please let the grass in the garden grow. It's, something so simple, but thinking about how we can protect biodiversity in our backyards can be the first step. So think about these simple efforts that you can take. And the second thing, and with this I'm gonna close for the moment, is be critical. Be critical of everything that is happening around you, be it a decision by your local community, a decision about what kind of school meals you're getting in your current school, but also be critical about the bigger things. A lot of politicians are now talking about climate change, and few are also talking about biodiversity, and it's great. I'm happy that we finally have so many people talking about it. But nowadays, everybody seems to be focusing on how we can make everything green. But is it really green? Is it really going to change something? This is the question that you have to ask, because we cannot afford to have more greenwashing, more fake solutions, more broken promises. We need real change. We need to make this transformative. And as high school students, you're in a unique position for this, because you will soon be students at university. You will soon join the workforce. You will soon have jobs, and we all want to have a planet with all the beauty of nature to preserve. So we have to make sure that whatever our leaders going to decide now will be real, serious, transformative changes, because otherwise we're not going to get out of this mess that previous generations have left for us. This is a question of intergenerational equity. And finally, become the leaders yourself. Don't be afraid to fill any of these seats. You are not too young to make change. All of us can do it. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Very powerful statement, Christian. That's wonderful. Okay, then I'm happy to invite next speaker, next panelist, Mr. James Close. Mr. Close is head of climate change at the NatWest Banking Group, and he's formerly was director for climate change at the World Bank and is TSL trustee. Mr. Close, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fumiko, and you know, follow that, as they say, Christian. That was really very powerful. I think I would just like to say, really, that the whole kind of biodiversity agenda has taken off in the last few years. I think there's a realization that the link between the ecological emergency that we face, climate change and biodiversity loss, and the sixth extinction are really inextricable. And the G7 said the same thing down in Cornwall. It's the first time I've seen in a G7 or a G20 communique that climate change and biodiversity loss have been put at the same level. And I think also for me personally, it's been a journey to realize how important biodiversity is, how significant our food systems are, and what a connection there is between our use of the land and the resources on the planet and the life that inhabits it. And I think it's just amazing to see so many powerful initiatives coming to the fore. So the Convention for Biodiversity will hold its COP this year, and that's an opportunity for all of the parties, which includes every single country apart from the US and Vatican City, to come together and put forward ambitions around managing biodiversity. And the great call to action has been around protecting 30% of the land and 30% of the oceans. And at the moment, we protect about 17% of the lands and 7% of the oceans. So we need to double the protection of the land and quadruple the protection of the ocean. So it's all extremely daunting, particularly when we see the rate of, for example, loss of coral in the oceans, and the way in which the acidification and warming of the oceans is creating dead spots, and also the tragedy of biodiversity loss that we see in the Amazon, and the impact that that's going to have on climate change, and how it's going to link to some of the tipping points that people like Johan Jockström describe and are part of. So it all can be extremely daunting, and particularly as you sit there with a lifetime ahead of you that you hope will have the same sort of benefits that we've had, who are somewhat older, in terms of consistent growth and technological development. But it's also, I think, really liberating. I mean, if you would, the food system that we've got is designed for the purpose that we intended, which is to create the maximum amount of food to feed the planet in the cheapest way. But if we really want a food system that is oriented towards increasing biodiversity and also feeding the planet in a nutritional and cost-effective way, you can do it very, very differently. And some of the concepts around rewilding, organic farming, also different forms of intensive farming, whether it's through hydroponics or other areas, can make a significant difference. But most importantly, we waste a third of the food that we produce. So imagine what you could do if you stopped wasting that food and built a food system that was going to satisfy and feed the whole planet in a fair and equitable way, in a way that meant that everybody had access to the right food, so we didn't have 30% of the population in developed countries obese and 30% in emerging markets as undernourished. And so, you know, biodiversity, food systems, and the way in which we treat lands and species can come together to create this really fantastic alternative future for us that can bring us not just great planetary and environmental circumstances, but also much greater happiness as we connect more with nature and the power that that can bring us. So thanks for bringing us all together, and great to be part of this wonderful panel, and always just love talking to so many young people out there who are so passionate about these topics.
Thank you, Mr. Close. Yeah, you have raised many complex and interlinked problems. For example, in the food system, we have to recognize the imbalanced distribution. Some people are over nutritious and others are less nutritious. And you have pointed out the importance of the reduction of the waste. Thank you. Okay, next, we are inviting two ambassadors. The first, I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Ronald Jumeau. He's a former cabinet minister and ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of the Republic of Seychelles. He's also a chair of the Executive Committee Council of SITSDOC, Small Island Developing States Sustainable Energy and Climate Resilience Organization. Please welcome Ambassador Jumeau.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fumiko, and hi, everybody. Just to start off, the picture you see behind me, that's 2 school children in Seychelles planting mangroves. We do a lot of tree planting in Seychelles. We're amongst the most forested countries in the world. What I want to talk about is how in Seychelles, we have empowered and enabled youth, children and youth, including school children, to the extent where they're now not just participants in protecting and promoting biodiversity, but they're actually leaders in doing it and putting pressure on the government and holding the government to task. We entered 2020, Seychelles entered 2020, having protected 47 to 48% of our land territory. We're trying to protect at least 50%, but we want to do more than 50%. We've protected 30% of our ocean. The 30% of ocean that's been protected, there's 2 categories. It's the size of Germany. So Seychelles has a population of 98,000, and we've protected marine protected areas the size of Germany. Half of that, 15% of our EZ, has been fully protected. So that's half the 30 by 30 target. And that is about the size of Britain. And one of the reasons we've been able to do it is by enlisting, not just encouraging and empowering, but enlisting children and youth when it comes to biodiversity, sustainability, and climate action. And actually, we have one of our many environmental climate NGOs called S4S, Sustainability for Seychelles, that sits with the Ministry of Education. And we have environment, conservation of biodiversity, sustainable development, climate change, all are part of the school curriculum. And every school has what we call a wildlife club. It's voluntary, with voluntary teachers. Every year we have a competition for the best eco school. There's no special eco school. That's all the primary and secondary schools. They have the wildlife clubs, and they are judged through their activities throughout the year. At the end of the year, the school is chosen, which wins the most points. The best eco teacher is chosen. These are teachers who volunteer after hours to go into the wildlife clubs. And the prize is a trip to Aldabra Atoll, a giant atoll, which has the largest population of giant tortoises in the world and one of the largest atolls in the world, at the cost of the government. Now, this is all meant to encourage students to voluntarily come and join in these activities. But we don't just encourage them to join in and to do that sort of thing. We encourage them. What we do is we start capturing students at around preschool, and they are followed and encouraged in primary school and secondary school. As they reach university age, the students who came before them have formed their own NGOs, environmental NGOs. Many of them are based around the ocean, because Seychelles' economy is based on marine-based tourism and on fisheries. And they joined these NGOs. And for example, it was one of these youth NGOs that pushed the government three years ago to ban single-use plastics. And in one go, we banned plastic bags, all the stuff used in picnics, cups, cutlery, plates. We even banned styrofoam food boxes, takeaway foods. And not to be outdone by the children and the students, the tourism industry, which is the biggest industry in Seychelles, next year, the following year came and said, but you've forgotten about plastic straws. And the government said, the reason we didn't put plastic straws, we wanted you to source other straws, because straws are used a lot in tourism, cocktails and so on. And they voluntarily followed the students in banning this. And apart from doing that, we have gone further in providing financing to youth and children's groups through grants. What Seychelles did in 2015 is we did the first debt swap for the ocean with the Paris Club. And we exchanged about $22 million of our debt with the help, our technical help of the Nature Conservancy, in return for protecting 30% of the ocean and placing the proceeds from the debt swap in an independent trust called SECAT, the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, independent of government. And that trust provides grants every year. And the grant, the only condition for a grant is you have to be a Seychelles citizen. It can be an individual, it can be a group, it can be a women's group, it can be a children's group, it doesn't matter who, and they compete. And a large proportion of the grants have actually gone to young people. And one of the things we did was the first CEO of SECAT was a foreigner. The second CEO was a Seychelles. And she was a woman. When she became CEO of a $22 million trust fund, she was 27 years old. And she had been working in the world of work only 5 years. So it was sending a message. We were also saying, it's not tokenism. We're not just saying, well, we have to do this for our children and youth. We're actually handing them the means to do it. And for example, when we were ready to ban the single-use plastics, some retailers, some shopkeepers who still had stocks of plastics ran to some politicians, and some politicians went to Parliament and said, oh, we don't think we're ready to do this. Can we extend this for another year? And the youth and students on their own mounted a social media campaign saying to the members of Parliament, how dare you come and propose this when we have had stakeholder discussions for the past 3 years? Where were you during those 3 years? You should be ashamed of yourself. And what the politicians did is they backed off. They realized. So now the children in Seychelles know that they first of all, you can do it in school, you can raise it. There are clubs you can join. There are NGOs run by youth for youth. When, for example, SECAT Trust Fund offers funds, a round of funds every year, grants, it goes out to youth groups to train youth and children how to write a project, how to apply for grants, and the grants are small, medium, and large, and what they need to do. They go out, the Blue Finance team, because we also, after the debt swap, $22 million debt swap, we also did the world's first sovereign blue bond, which is $15 million for transitioning to a more sustainable fishery. The two are linked, and they go out into communities. Communities can request, they go online, they do virtual. So anybody, doesn't matter what your level of education is, can apply to it. So the youth feel at any time, they know their power now, they know they've held the government to account at once. And what we do what we did in government, I was Minister of Environment from the year 2000 to 2007. During those times, when we had a new initiative, environmental initiative, or new species that we wanted to protect, when we realized that maybe we would have problems with certain adults, we would take it to the schools. We would get the schools to do competitions, singing competitions, poetry competitions, poster competitions, protect the shark, protect the turtle, protect this. And then we would get the children to take it home. And this is where the power of children is, what we discovered. Adults will say, no government is going to tell me how I'm going to live my life. But when the children come and say, Dad, Mom, You can't do this. And the first, can you say, example to the kids are the parents. When I was minister, I had a father who came to me and said, in Seychelles, we protect all sea turtles. And we used to consider them as part of our culture, as part of our cuisine. And one father said to me, said, Minister, if I could get away, I would still eat sea turtle because I have eaten it all my life. I'm not convinced by arguments. She says, but I will be chased out of my own home by my kids. I can't do it anymore. So what you do is empower the kids in their families, in their preschool, in kindergarten, in primary, in all the way to university. And they're all along the way, there are groups of people who are waiting to capture them saying, this one can be an environmental champion. This one can be a blue champion or a forest champion. So not only token, just don't say it, but provide them with the means, and students and children who are listening to me, if you're not provided the means, ask for them. And say, whenever you hear either a president, a prime minister, a minister saying, we must do this for our children and grandchildren, say, excuse me, I'm one of those children. I don't need you to do this. You give me the means and I will help you do it properly, so that we really safeguard the future for future generations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Very impressive. Well, not only the talk, but also the real examples. And school education system is so successful in having children having strong voices to change their political world issues. It's really great. And your example is in line with the Christian's statement. So I would encourage your discussions later on. But before that, I'd like to invite the last panelist, His Excellency Mr. Ambassador Rafael Ortiz Fábrega, Ambassador to UK for Costa Rica, and he's co-chair of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People as well. So, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon from London. Thank you very much, Fumiko, and thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this event. It is indeed an honor to be joined by such great panelists and having heard their experiences. I will just briefly share some of the aspects that Costa Rica has been involved in many through the years in many of these activities related to climate change. But we believe firmly that one of the things that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown is how climate change, biodiversity loss, and our health are deeply intertwined, and this mandates for a coordinated effort to tackle them. Indeed, science is very clear. We need to invest in protecting nature if we want to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and stop biodiversity loss. We currently are facing the extinction of at least 1 million species in the next decades. Now, how can we act? We've seen great examples of the panelists. What can we do? What have we decided? We are moving this year towards two key moments. I've been mentioned the COP of Biodiversity, COP15 and COP26 that will be held here in the UK, in Glasgow. And this will define a lot of the paths that we need to go forward in the coming years, decades. But we believe that it's now more important than ever to turn to the scientific community, to listen and act promptly. And therefore, by means of educating, of transmitting these concepts, this knowledge to the youth, to the next generations, we will undoubtedly create a more robust coalitions, not only of governments, of NGOs, but of the population and of our future generations. And we can share a bit more what we do in Costa Rica regarding that. But first, I believe that one thing that we can do all of us can really do, and the ambassador said it before, we have to start changing by changing our consumption and our production patterns. I think these were great examples that you laid out in Seychelles. We need to invest in sustainable use of our resources, investing therefore in the protection of nature to help boost our economies. A nature-minded pathway is not only possible, it is profitable. In Costa Rica, we have proven this. We base our economic model on sustainability. Protecting biodiversity and tackling climate change have been top priorities for decades in Costa Rica. It is ingrained in our DNA. We are blessed with a beautiful country, you know, where we have in only 52,000 kilometers, 6% of the biodiversity of the world. So we are really, since we grow up, we are raised to, you know, to protect and to make this something that will not disappear in the future. So just a recent report evidence what protected areas and national parks have provided has financial benefits. Over $1.9 billion in 2018 alone. And that represents about 3.5 points of our GDP. Furthermore, there was a biofin study that said that the total annual value of Costa Rica's natural capital was estimated to represent 23% of our gross domestic product. This shows the significant contribution that nature provides to human, local, and global well-being. Let me just tell you a story. 50 years ago, we were going through the wrong path. We had started to destroy or really deplete our forest coverage. We were down to about 20% of forest coverage. But we went into programs, into creating national parks, into biological reserves, and to start incentivizing people, our indigenous people, our most vulnerable communities, through taxes that we established on petrol. And we can now proudly say, you know, 50 years after that, that about 55% of our land has forest coverage. So this is our national experience. And one of the main challenges that many developing countries face, though, is the lack of finance and resources to implement nature-based solutions. And this is something that we need to really fight for, to have the more developed countries to help us invest in nature, and especially considering the consequences that we have faced now, COVID being one example. So this is why we believe that the investments in natural-based solutions and ocean-based solution must increase dramatically in recognition of this need. Second, collective action. We believe that in the power of multilateralism, collective action is essential if we really truly want to tackle climate change, not as a problem of one country, but a global problem. This is why Costa Rica, along with France and the UK, as an ocean co-chair, are leading the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. It's formed by over 60 countries worldwide, and it looks to protect 30% of our planet's oceans and our lands by 2030. Costa Rica is committed to this goal as a tool to help reverse biodiversity loss and to fulfill the commitments of the Paris Agreement. We have committed to protecting 30% of our own lands and oceans, and this is a big challenge that we take on with ambition and conviction that protecting our natural resources is the way forward. And third, active participation of civil society. The examples that we have set. In our country, we know that indigenous people and local communities are often the best guardians of biodiversity. We work closely with them as partners in the design and management of protected areas, ensuring free, prior, and informed consent of things that are going forward. We believe that this is crucial in order that we can underscore and safeguard the world's remaining biodiversity, partnering and respecting the rights and the traditional knowledge of indigenous people and local communities, who are often the world's best stewards of nature. We believe that this increased target should promote indigenous-led conservation, and we need to ensure these rights are respected and are engaged in our partners in designing the management of protected and conserved areas. In this respect, it's very interesting. In our educational system, we put forward a contest in the different schools in our country, where the students are together promote with the community studying of the species, the biodiversities, and putting forward proposals and engaging in not only in planting trees and protecting the biodiversity in our lands, in our beaches, getting together with groups to engage in cleaning, you know, our lands and our beaches. So therefore, active participation of youth is essential. You will inherit this planet, and we have to carry out and correct these actions. We have a growing movement of young people in our country that care for the state, not only of our country, but of our planet. And we have recognized that, you know, there is really, like they say, no planet B for us to inhabit. We need really to listen to these voices, to adopt innovative ideas and technologies that will protect nature in that. So I definitely encourage to actively engage in these local actions and in going forward in producing these decision-making process that will really have an impact in the course of our own life. My country is an example of that. We are small in size. Like I said, we hold only 6% of the world's biodiversity, but our actions can be considered minuscule if we compare to bigger countries. But by leading the international community and pushing for bolder and ambitious actions, we can really together make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is another excellent and wonderful examples in biodiversity-rich, beautiful country. And so with this, after listening to the excellent and outstanding statements from 4 panelists, I would like to encourage the panelists to ask questions or make comments each other. But as the 2 ambassadors have expressed their very good example of engaging children and youth in the government policy, and especially the environmental protecting policy, which was the main statement by Christian. I would like to encourage Christian to ask some specific questions to ambassadors if you want. Are you happy to ask concrete
thank you
questions?
so much, Fumiko, for this opportunity. Well, I can only agree with you with the both ambassadors, what you said. I feel like we need to clone you. We need to make you ambassadors of a number of other countries, because what you said is so much in line with what a lot of young people are thinking. I want to comment on a couple of things that were said. Ronnie were, for instance, focusing on the issue of debt and how a debt swap enabled them to provide resources and to create a fund for the environment. What I really can only applaud is the fact that you are also focusing on giving resources to young people. I think this is something that I cannot overstate, because young people really want to change things. They really want to do it. But the problem is often how to do it. They don't know where to start. And then when you know where to start, the question is, where are you going to get the resources from? And a lot of resources that are in existence, a lot of funds, they're usually only being given to big environmental organizations. They're not being given to young people or to small environmental groups. And I feel there should be a requirement for all these global funds, be it from the World Bank, the Global Environmental Facility, or whatever, a national fund, that a certain quota should be given to young people. But the reality is that many of these funds are structured in a way that you have to have a huge apparatus of bureaucracy, of administrative people behind you, just to be able to access these funds. And what you're doing, the Seychelles, exemplary in the sense that you open it up to young people, that you even have young people leading projects, because we can do this. We have all these skills. What you also mentioned is that you're doing workshops on how to write grant applications. I think this is exactly the way to go. We have to make these funds more accessible to young people. The problem is really not the money when it comes to biodiversity conservation. The money is out there. When we're looking at what the G20, the G7 have decided, we have funds available. If you look at the pandemic, how many funds could suddenly be mobilized to save the economies? Then all these things that we have heard in the last 10 or 15 years, that there is simply not enough money to solve climate change, to address the loss of biodiversity, it's simply not true. It's a question of how we use this money that we have available. And I think making some of these funds more accessible to young people is an absolute key to the solution. Another point that I want to touch upon is what was also said with regards to global north and global south relationships. Protecting the environment, addressing climate change is also a question of equity. We have to realize that a very small number of countries, a very small number of people is using the vast majority of resources on this planet. The reason why countries like mine are so wealthy is because we shamelessly exploited countries like Costa Rica, like the Seychelles in the last decades. So reversing this system of exploitation is something that we have to put at the core of environmental policies, at the core of environmental policies. And the debt swap, I think, is a good start. But now that we're in the pandemic, now that a lot of countries, especially in the global south, had to accumulate even more debt to finance their stimulus packages, we really have to figure out ways how countries in the global north that have the resources can find ways to waive this debt in order to give countries the fiscal breathing space to invest into the environment, to create the funds. Because otherwise we're not going to be able to change this. So thank you so much to both the ambassadors for your statements. I'm really, really happy about this. My last point is for James, because if I understood it correctly, you're working for a huge financial institution. I had a meeting with my bank a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about, okay, what can I do in terms of like investments? And when I told them I actually want to invest into some small biodiversity projects, it was just looking at me as if I was talking a different language. He was like, all right, you can invest into like this big agricultural company or this pharmaceutical company. So I think there is a big problem with the banking system, because people want to change it, but if banks are not offering products that are allowing investments into these things, then how is it going to work? What my banker was telling me at the end, well, you could do all of this, but it would not be very profitable. So I think this is the problem here. We need to find ways to make this attractive for people. And we have to come back from this paradigm that everything just needs to be profitable.
Thank you, Christian. So I think the questions are addressed to 3 other panelists. So I would invite 3 other people to answer individually. And for Ambassador Jumeau, there is a question also to you from the participants. And please add your explanation on the best eco school and best eco teacher in your reply. And I'd like to warn you, because I heard some thunderstorm around Tokyo area, and the internet connection is not stable at the moment. So if I happen to be not to be able to connect to you, please go ahead in discussions. So at first, Ambassador Jumeau, and then Ambassador Ortiz Fábrega, and then Mr. Close, could you give your ideas to respond to Christian's questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Fumiko, and thank you, Christian. Just before I go on to commenting further on Christian, you brought up more ideas, things I could say about loans from commercial banks and that sort of thing. One thing I didn't talk about, which engages the entire population in Seychelles as guardians of the environment or environmental police. I don't know if any other country has this. In Seychelles, we have what we call a green line. It is a special number to report any offenses against the environment. That number is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's open on Christmas Day, it's open on New Year's Day. Anybody, anywhere can pick up a phone and call that number to say someone is harming the environment, or there's a storm, or the beach is being, and the person who has the phone, who has the number, has a logbook that they have to log in. Now, to come back to the debt swap, and I'm glad to see now when you're looking at recovery from COVID, of building back greener, debt swaps are coming back into fashion, because what is happening is that the debt of vulnerable countries and poor countries is now increasing, because like tourism has collapsed or industries have collapsed. And Seychelles' name is coming up more and more now. It's coming back into fashion. But one of the advantages of a debt swap, and I said, for example, youth and children around the world should put pressure on their governments to provide funding. One of the issues of the debt swap is that it cannot be touched by the government, and it is immune from COVID. So the money is there, even if the government cannot say, oh, you know, we don't have funds, we have other priorities, it's health priorities, it's vaccines, and this money is there for what the purpose it was set up. So it's there even through COVID. This year, it is latest call for funds. Now, I talked of the blue bond. The blue bond, the grants, we call them the blue grants. The blue bond provides what we call blue loans. And the blue loans are offering loans to the fisheries sector at a better rate than commercial banks. It's precisely the problem, especially small fishers, artisanal fishers, young people who are going into fisheries for the first time. And the only condition when you go is they will say, what is the blue part of your project? What is it which is ocean friendly, climate friendly, biodiversity friendly? And if you don't have something, they say, well, you're free to go to a commercial bank knowing that you will have a very difficult time, like you're saying, Christian. Eco schools. Eco schools, what we have is the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Education, and a NGO, civil society, Sustainability for Seychelles, S4S. They have a committee where they plan how to bring the environment, biodiversity, conservation, climate action, sustainability into the schools, how best to do it, where the resources will be funded, sometimes getting from people from private sector to fund special issues. And now we've been doing it for so many years, it's just automatic. And during the year, they will announce publicly, we are doing, for example, on SIDS Day, Small Island Developing States, we have a day of our own, an international day. They will say, we are launching on SIDS Day such and such a competition. And the schools can join these competitions, and it goes online, or before COVID, it went public. They went into shopping malls and they did their competitions, and judges would come and judge these and give points. And at the end of the year, they would award points. But now it's become just a natural thing to do. The point I was trying to make earlier on is, once you start this, once the children and the youth get these leadership skills, there is no going back. No government can come and stop this. Because don't forget, the youth of today are the voters of tomorrow. And the governments keep that in mind. Some of the students we're talking about, they're 16, 17, Seychelles, you vote at 18 years old. Some are there in the early 20s waiting to go to university. So the government is very aware that now that we have enabled, empowered and youth and pushed them to the forefront and said, stop complaining, do something about it. We will come beside you, with you, behind you, and support you. And sometimes the government will actually tell youth groups, can you take a lead on this? Knowing that as a youth group, they will meet less opposition within society. because we're a small community. This is my son, this is my daughter who's there. So this is how we got this eco school. And now when you drive around during school days, you drive around the alley and you see a bunch of kids like in the picture behind me planting something. No one says, people say, oh, wildlife club. It's become a normal, common sight to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Ambassador Ortiz Fábrega.
Thank you. Well, I think it's very important from the point of view of what we do in these. Like I said, this year is key, and I would really like to take this opportunity to highlight that the High Ambition Coalition that Costa Rica, I mentioned, is co-chairing with France and the UK, is our basic and most important goal for the COP15 is really to be able to gather this momentum and to obtain the ratification of an ambitious science-driven global deal that would really help to safeguard our nature and humanity's future. And this is something that we have been working on since basically when Costa Rica was the country that held the pre-COP 25 in October of 2019. And this is how this idea evolved. And that year we were granted the Award of Champions of the Earth by the United Nations. And this also led to our enacting the decarbonization, the net zero by 2050. How does this fit with youth? Well, very importantly, I think that the educations and the emphasis that we have put on this for the last 30, 40 years has also created a very aggressive group of people, young people that have started startup companies. So we are looking from the angle of our diplomatic activities really to come again to what I think is a recurring theme that we're seeing now, funds. How do we direct this not only to nature-based solutions, but how do we, let's say, identify, in this pre-COP, we identified 125 interesting startups that have to do with the green economy, and how these models of these entities can, let's say, we can provide resources coming from these countries, and something that they can not only apply in our country, but to make these alliances across the region in our example. But not only that, we have brought, let's say, let me tell you of one concrete example. A group of students in our technological university have been developing a technology that can be used for the batteries for electric vehicles, but without utilizing some of the materials that are used sometimes and can also create an effect on the biodiversity. We have, let's say, put them together with a university here in the UK, and also working towards funding these investigations. So our youth are the people, are the people that coming from schools, from high school, but to universities, that will come with these innovation ideas. And what we have to do is create a platform. In our countries, we probably might not have the funds, but our countries have the human capital, and what we need is to empower them, connect them. Let's say when we are serving in countries like the UK with technology, with universities, with funds. And this is something that can be shared worldwide. This, for example, this project that we have brought people now from Costa Rica that are working here with that. So that's why I encourage the youth of right now of thinking, beyond any limits, to be bold in your ambitions, to create and to propose ideas that can be implemented. And like Christian said, the funds are there. It is our obligation as the older generations, as people that occupy positions right now, to provide these opportunities through resources, through technologies, through our efforts geared towards that. And I'm sure many things can be achieved. We just have to be, we have to serve as the companions that provide these opportunities for all these ideas.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador. I see Ambassador Jumeau is raising your hand, but could you just wait a minute? And I would like to welcome James Close, James, if I may call you, to answer to your the question from Christian. And we're running out of time, so yeah, your brief comment will be very welcome. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Fumiko. Look, money's at the heart of everything, and we can't wish it away. We do need to mobilize funds. So I would say, first, let's put a price on carbon, a really ambitious price on carbon that will enable money to be redirected towards those low carbon technologies of the future. And second, as a bank, we've committed to the race to zero. We're a member of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. We're the first bank to put a really ambitious target around halving the climate impact of our financing by 2030. And we're committed to net zero by 2050. And I'd also say that many of our funds do give really high quality environmental and social governance access to businesses, the like of which Christian has described. But it's not easy. We have to build it into a new way of doing things and a new system and a new way of thinking about how we get money to flow for biodiversity and for climate action.
Great, thank you so much. And so finally, I would like to welcome again the Ambassador Jumeau to reply. And if you could add your idea how to expand your own experiences to other countries, the similar nature rich but still developing countries, how to share with your expertise, that would be great.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with James when he's talking about the price of carbon. One of the things what you're going to see at COP26 is many more countries are going to include the ocean in their NDCs. And one of the things we're looking at is blue carbon. Seychelles has committed to protect 50% of its mangroves and seagrasses by 2035 and 100% of our mangroves and seagrasses by 2050. And these are some of the best carbon sinks in the world, much better carbon sinks than forests on land. To answer, the reason I raised my hand is I was just reading that question that was in the chat about eco schools, and did you see an increase in sustainability involvement by schools? Well, Seychelles, the schools now are champions of rainwater harvesting with the assistance of private sector. They're getting tanks to harvest rainwater from the roofs. And they're also, with the help of government and foreign governments, championing the transition of electricity, use of electricity in public buildings, transitioning all the schools to solar and solar power especially. So the schools are already now cashing in, quote unquote, on this. Seychelles has always been ready to share, to answer your question, Fumiko, to share and replicate whatever he wants. And all they need is to contact us. We are so keen to do it. And in the past, we've had people who have contacted us. We've had governments who have contacted us. We are a small island developing state. When I was the ambassador to the United Nations in New York, one of the Caribbean ambassadors contacted me and said, can you share with us your legislation for the transition to solar and wind energy, which we are now doing? And the two governments got together and started talking. And through SIDS, what I'm doing, that I chair, other countries have asked how can they organize a celebration of small islands on a certain day of the year? How do we get all the schools involved where all these issues can be raised again on a special day for school kids? So we are ready, we stand ready to share what we have and hopefully replicate and upscale if necessary in bigger countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm very impressed by very rich discussions with you all. And the knowledge and experience sharing would be applicable also for Costa Rica, because your neighboring countries has been suffering the same challenges, but also have great opportunities as you have. So I hope today's talk and discussions will be very influential to the globe. And now I would like to get back to Carl to close the session. And before that, I would like to thank everyone and thank you all the participants to the session. Okay, Carl.
Thank you so much, Fumiko, and thank you, panelists. What an incredible, inspiring discussion. Thank you so much for sparing the time today with us. We really, really appreciate it. And we hope the learning journey and the sharing journey will continue. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and can I just say a little note to the viewing audience that we are going to take a very short break on this same link, but in about 5 minutes time, if you use exactly the same link, or if you actually just stay on screen, we'll move on to the closing, the very short 15-minute closing event. So thank you so much, everyone, for making Partner Power Summit 2021 a wonderful experience, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fumiko, for chairing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I enjoyed a lot.
Oh, wonderful.